Welcome to Americana Country Interview. I'm your host, Jay Preston. Interview features chats with artists that you hear each and every week on our radio show, Americana Country, now heard on 5 radio stations throughout Kentucky and Tennessee and worldwide on your favorite streaming services. Today, we welcome an old friend, singer-songwriter, Bill Lloyd. Hi, Bill. How are you?
Hi, Jay. Great to see you again, man.
Great, great, good to see you too. And I did read your bio, so I've got a lot of questions here for you. And let's just start it off. I know, well, we met in Bowling Green, Kentucky, in the early '70s, and before you became uh, famous, known musician in Nashville, Tennessee, you were in Bowling Green, Kentucky, but you were born in Texas because your dad, I believe, was in the military,
That's
and
correct.
and you, so you traveled, I guess, like a lot of military kids all around the country. And so, how did you wind up in Bowling Green? Was your dad, did he finally retire or go to Fort Campbell?
He went from having been retired as a captain in the service. I was in Fort Hood, Texas, was where I was born, and then we moved to Tokyo, Japan,
Oh, wow.
and lived there for a few years. So
Mhm.
my earliest memories are really of Tokyo,
Oh,
and
wow.
then moved back. Lived in Columbus, Georgia, when he was at Fort Benning, and then we moved to Nashville, where
Hmm.
he was no longer in the service, and spent a couple years here in Nashville, where I went to kindergarten and first grade.
Hmm.
Uh, and he was the assistant manager of a country club here called the Richland Country Club, and then he got his own country club, so he was the manager of the Bowling Green Country Club for many years.
Oh, okay.
And so I was the son of the country club manager, and and that's how I ended up in Bowling Green.
Yeah. Okay. And how old were you about that time?
Oh, a second grade, whatever that is,
Yeah.
at 8 or something like that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mentioned that we met quite a few years ago, and you were kind of sort of already in the music business. You were at a record store. Might
Yeah,
want
there
to
was a rec
explain.
there was a in Bowling Green, there was a record store in Fairview Plaza,
Right.
and it was the Emporium when I started. No, I'm sorry, it was Tapes and Tops when I started. Then it was bought by somebody else, and it was called the Emporium,
Hmm.
and then bought by somebody else called Toontown. And it's like I came with the fixtures. Every time a new owner would come in, they would say, "Yeah, we're keeping those bins and those light fixtures there." And oh, that guy,
That
keep him.
guy.
So, but yeah, I was lucky to have this obsession with music and to be able to work with record store. That was like a big deal to me. And
Right.
it's still hard for me to not walk by a record store and go in.
Well, when you
You know,
can find them, when you can find them.
yeah, but there's some good ones
Yeah.
out there, and God bless them for being there.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember well, Bill, when someone was asking about a particular artist or an import back in the old days,
Yeah.
they would always they say, "Go see Bill." You know,
Well,
over.
there's a few good guys, a few old friends here that are still around in Bowling Green that were
Mhm.
part of that whole scene. And
Yeah.
Jeff Sweeney was always a good guy to go see. I don't remember Jeff, but
Yeah. Yeah.
he was a great guy. And that was a different record store than us. But hey, we had a great time. Those were really wonderful times for music, for pop music, for rock music,
Hmm.
and uh, and it was a great little scene we had there.
Well, I talked to a friend of yours, Kyle Frederick, not too long ago, and he mentioned some of the early influences that he had there in Bowling Green. How about you? Did you some of your early musical influences were they in Bowling Green, or did you have
Yeah,
a
well,
wider range?
my mom had been a librarian, and my dad, when he was in the service, managed officers clubs.
Hmm.
But he was also a journalist and a DJ, and I don't know. There was lots of books and records in my house growing up,
Hmm.
so that was a good thing. And I started, besides Disney records and stuff as a little kid,
Yeah.
I requested from my mother to get me a Rick Nelson album
Oh
because
yeah.
I'd seen him at the end of the Ozzie and Harriet show singing.
Yeah.
I love those songs.
Yeah.
And then the Beatles happened, and I was what, 9 or something like that. And of course, like everybody all over the globe, you were transfixed by that, and then you wanted to be in a band the next day,
Exactly. Yeah. Well,
So
I know you're a big Beatles fan. In fact, you, if I remember correctly, you hosted or co-hosted Beatles show on a national radio station for a year or two, didn't you?
Well, I would be a guest. I was a, excuse me, I was a guest that reappeared a lot. But my buddy Richard Courtney had the show called From Me to You, and
Mhm.
it's still the old shows are still airing out there,
Yeah.
and anyway, but yeah, I love talking about it. I'm such a deep fan, and some of the biggest thrills of my life were getting to work with people that were sort of halfway affiliated, or actually, I play on a Ringo album, but there was I got to write some songs with Giles Martin, who was George Martin's son.
Hmm.
And when I worked with Cheap Trick, we worked with a guy named Jeff Emmerich, who was the Beatles engineer. And just to be able to ask him questions about how those records were made and how they were recorded was a thrill.
Right.
So yeah, the Beatle thing still looms large for me.
Right. Well, I can, and I'm sure all of your fans can hear some of the influence in your music over the years. After you sing the Beatles, like we all did on the Ed Sullivan Show that first time, how long was it after that you formed your first band?
Well, there was a couple friends I had in school that were, a fellow named Mark Owens, who still lives up there, a great drummer and owns a studio up there. And in fact, the studio that we recorded as a band called Sergeant Arms,
Hmm.
uh, and you played our records on
I remember that.
97 and
Yeah.
on WBGN. And anyway, he actually lives out there or lives close to that studio where and works there where we used to work many years ago. So that's kind of a full circle cool thing.
Yeah.
And then I met friends in high school and lifelong friends who I still am close to and make music with, and you know, I started playing 3 nights a week when I was 15.
Yeah.
So that was in the local bar.
Yeah.
Not supposed to be playing,
Well, that was my next question. Were you sneaking in
Yeah,
and out of the bars?
yeah. Well, it was just me and my buddy Graham Husband were supposed to be older, but we weren't. And
Yeah.
we were the rhythm section. He was the bass player, and I was the drummer at that
Right.
time. And we played with a couple college guys who were a few years older than us. And but yeah, playing 3 nights a week when you're that age, that was professional. I bought my first guitar, uh, or my first good guitar, acoustic guitar, with the money I made from that gig.
Wow. Wow.
And
Did you do you still have that guitar?
I do, I
Wow.
do, I
That's
do.
something most people can't say that they
Yeah.
still have their very first guitar. And I
Oh, there's
know,
a few.
go
Yeah.
ahead.
Oh, there's a few I let go. I wish I hadn't,
Yeah.
but
Well, a lot of musicians say that as well. Some of their favorites they had to let go. They had to do like a lot of guys, struggling musicians do, and they have to pawn it or sell it to get a few bucks to pay rent or what have you. Hey,
yeah.
listen, you mentioned Sergeant Arms. I know that was one of the bands that I'm familiar with. There's another band that I remember. I was trying to remember, and the memory's not so great anymore, but back in the Bowling Green days. But weren't you were in a band called Southern Star, kind of a folky kind of thing for a while?
That's correct. That was like a singer-songwriter band,
Yeah.
and uh, Kim Ritchie, who's still out there
Yeah.
killing it.
Just got a
She's
new album out. Yeah.
Yes, and it's so good.
Yes.
It is so good. And yeah, another lifelong friend, and Kim and David Surface and a guy named David Ray Walker, who's
Hmm.
still up there in Bowling Green, great guy. He was the one who turned me on to John Prine and Guy Clark and people like that, who I later got to work with.
Yeah.
But it was like a little singer-songwriter band, and then we went electric and added more people,
Right.
Randy Goodman, and it kind of one band morphed into another,
Right.
and
Right.
so Southern Star was started off as being kind of an acoustic singer-songwriter band, but we had a song that was on a one of those radio station samplers out of Louisville called WLRS was the station, and they had a homemade thing, and they played. We got some airplay out of the song that we had on their record.
Yeah. Walrus, I believe they called themselves back in those days.
Yeah. They
Yeah.
and they were that was pretty cool for a band from down south in Bowling Green to be able to get on that thing.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned several people there between Sergeant Arms and Southern Star, and you've been a part of duets as well. David Surface and you teamed up quite a few. I know you're still friends with David, and I guess he's still making music there as well, or wherever he
He's
is.
mostly, yeah, he does that, and he mostly writes these days and teaches. He's a teacher. He's a writer. He's got several books out. He's a
Hmm.
really talented guy. I just and again, like I said, a lifelong friend
Right.
who I'm lucky to have the longtime friends I've had.
You guys wrote a lot of tunes together, didn't you?
Yeah, and still, I mean, even after Sergeant Arms,
Yeah.
which he moved to New York in 82, and I moved to Nashville,
Right.
and and I think the single that we had put out was still on the chart on WBGN
Yeah.
back then when
Yeah.
when the band broke up.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, but he and I continued to write over the years and record together, and it's a
Yeah.
good
That
part.
that song was on the charts when I left that radio station you mentioned and got
Yeah.
into the TV business for a few years. Now, David Surface and you, Surface and Lloyd was a thing, and then we come to this. How about Foster and Lloyd?
There it is. Yeah. Well, Radney and I met when we were both signed to Mary Tyler Moore Music Publishing. We
Hmm.
were two of the younger guys there, and we started writing together and found a good, working relationship. And we had a lot of songs, and they were just sort of one got cut by a group called Sweethearts of the Rodeo,
Yeah.
called Since I Found You, and it did well. And all of a sudden, it kind of turned more attention towards us.
Hmm.
And we had a couple different labels interested in what we were doing. And um, there was one that RCA Records where there was a guy named Mark Wright who was actually looking at Will Rambeau and I, because we would play around town just doing fun covers and stuff. We had a couple original songs, but when that guy said, "Hey, what we want to call you guys Will Billy," and I went, "No, I don't want to do that."
Right.
And Ratney and I had already written a bunch of good songs, I thought,
Right.
and so I actually went kind of around that guy and said to my buddy Randy Goodman, and I said, Mark's talking to me about this duo thing, but I said, listen to this other stuff. And gave him a cassette, and it's all these songs that Radney and I had written together, or songs that he wrote that I played on, sang
Hmm.
harmony on, or songs that I wrote that he sang for me because he
Hmm.
had a country voice.
Yeah.
And you put all those together, and that was pretty much our first album.
Yeah. Yeah. You guys were gold there, man. I tell you, you had a great run.
It was exciting, and it happened all so fast,
Yeah.
from being staff songwriters to opening for Roy Orbison
Yeah.
on tour, and it just kept going. And the first single went to number one on all the charts except Billboard. It was top five in Billboard,
Yeah.
uh, but everywhere else it was a number one record. And
Yeah. It's a great record.
and it was Crazy Over You it was called.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it was fun, and we had a good run at RCA. We did three regular albums and the greatest hits.
Well, I
So
remember, you probably will too. Nashville had a downtown music festival called Summer Lights for several years, and it was very popular. And I think financially, it wasn't very popular, but uh, you guys played that festival, and News Channel 5 aired Summer Lights in its entirety, the night showcases, and you guys did, of course, a nice set, and we broadcast that, and you did an extended. Maybe we should call it like in the old days, the album cut version of "Crazy Over You," and it was
yeah.
awesome, man. It was awesome. In fact,
Thank you.
just a couple of
Everybody gets
days.
to solo. That was
Right.
it. Everybody gets to solo, right?
Right, exactly. And just a few days ago, I caught that again on YouTube, and I was thinking I saw a couple of the my fellow employees when we were broadcasting that in the background, getting the right camera shots of you guys, and
Uh,
we won an Emmy for that broadcast. So hey, thank you.
is that right? Oh,
That's
that's
right.
awesome. I didn't,
That's right.
man, that's something I'm gonna have to add that
Yeah,
to the list of, like, hey, did you know?
yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
In fact, I told Sam Bush the last time I talked to him, I told him, "Thank you very much for my Emmy." But hey, since you Foster and Lloyd is such a huge hit, you guys had several great albums. When I started Americana Country in 2016, you were just you gave me or you shipped me your last Foster and Lloyd album, and
Yeah, we got back together and did one more, you
yeah,
know.
and I loved a couple of those cuts on it, wore them out, and love you guys separately as well as together. So, what have you been doing post Foster and Lloyd?
Well, there's a lot actually. I worked for RCA for a while,
Hmm.
and I was doing a talent scout thing for them, which had a budget, and so ended up producing some people.
Hmm.
Dan Baird from the Georgia Satellites and I produced a band called the Woods, and anyway, there was that, and then I was involved with a band with John Cowan from Newgrass Revival, Pat Simmons of the Doobies, and Rusty Young from Poco, and that was
Sky
called
Kings.
Sky Kings. Yeah,
Yeah,
and that was like unbelievably unsuccessful. We
but
thought
you
we
guys,
thought
you guys were awesome. You had a great sound. I love the sound and
yeah.
reminiscent of Poco on steroids.
Oh, that's nice. Well, it was really a real honor to get to play with Rusty and Pat,
Yeah,
who I know, and of course John too. I get to sing on John's new album, or did just got to. He's got a new one coming out,
yeah,
and you know, it was the Nashville guys getting to work with the rock icons. You know, it's like Pat and of course John is out with the Doobie Brothers now as a bass player
right.
and
Yeah.
has been for like 20 years now.
Hmm.
And Rusty passed a few years ago,
Right.
which led to a band that called Cimarron 615 that I was a part of
Hmm.
for a while, a couple of years,
Yeah.
and I opted out of that. I was not into the road life, and decided I'd rather stay home at my age. So I'm
I
done.
understand.
Yeah, and so I've made a ton of solo records over the years. They're available at, may I plug my website?
Sure, of course.
They're available at billlloydmusic.net.
Yeah.
There's four L's in a row there, BILLLLOYD
Right. Right.
music.net. And there's a bunch of CDs, and I've enjoyed doing those. I've gotten to work and write with a lot of my heroes over the years, and just for instance, on last night I went to see 10cc here in Nashville, and
Wow.
Gouldman is a guy that I've written a couple songs with now,
Yeah.
and it was, you know, just to have that sort of full circle working relationship with people that when I was working in a record store, I was pushing
Yeah.
his records, and now
Yeah.
I'm getting to write with him. So that's exciting,
Yeah.
you
I
know.
got to play a lot of 10cc back in the day.
Yeah, I
And
just saw him last night. It was amazing.
yeah.
And so over the years, I've gotten to work with a lot of great people. I've been a sideman for other people as a guitar player and singer for Poco. When Rusty went back out with Poco, I did it a few times. Marshall Crenshaw, but Cheap Trick was the big one because that lasted a few years. We played the Hollywood Bowl two
Wow.
years in a row doing Sergeant Pepper, the Beatles' Sergeant Pepper with orchestra.
Yeah.
And I was a sideman guitar player. I was in the back singing harmony and playing guitar, but it was so great to get to play Beatles songs with Cheap Trick and an orchestra. That was so much fun.
Well, that was
And then,
that was a double great whammy for you, wasn't it?
yeah, it really was, and I love them too.
Yeah.
And so I've gotten to do a lot of fun stuff over my life, and really grateful for that, and still happy to still be active, to still make my modest little records and put them out on the web, and then occasionally I'll have something click through from having a cut somewhere else from someone else doing one of my songs, and that's great too.
Yeah.
I've had
Well,
a lot.
you dropped a few names there. You've been on several albums and you've written quite a few things. Drop a few names of some of the right songs that you've written that's been covered by others.
Oh, well, and one of my co-writers from the old MTM days, Mary Tyler Moore, was a woman named Beth Nielsen Chapman,
Hmm.
and she makes fantastic records, and I've gotten to play and sing and co-write with her on a bunch of her records. Her
Hmm.
most recent record has a song we co-wrote,
Hmm.
and a song called "World of Hurt" that we wrote was a big hit in Europe. And we had a song called "I Keep Coming Back to You" from her first album. That was one of those songs I could hear in the grocery store, I actually heard it in a dentist's office once, and it wasn't her version. It was like a pan flute, Zamfir, whatever kind of thing,
The
and
Muzak version.
yeah, the music version. I was like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
sitting in a dentist chair, going, I co-wrote that song. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you. You were talking about some of the projects that you've worked on, and one of the things I remember you working on for many, many years was the Freedom Sings uh, program. Give us a
Thank you
little
for
bit of
bringing that
background,
up.
little bit of background on for those that are not aware of what that was.
Well, it was put together by a really remarkable guy named Ken Paulson, who was the big licks in his career are really great ones. He was a lawyer and a journalist, uh, newspaper editor guy who started working for John Siegenthaler in the
Hmm.
Freedom Forum
Right.
in here in Nashville, and he'd come down. He's a Chicago guy, and he's a big music fan, and he saw me play, and we started talking, and he said, "I've got this idea to put this little program together called Freedom Sings, where you mix the importance of the First Amendment with a historical but musical story to go with it." And Joan L. Mosser and Will Kimbrough and Don Henry and Joseph Wooten from the Wooten Brothers, and
Mhm.
we had so many great players and people as part of this thing. And it was sort of a revolving cast, but for 20 years, I was the music director for that thing. And we went all over the country doing these programs that were, both informational and entertaining. And Ken was left for a while to become the editor of USA Today, but then he came back, and he was the dean at MTSU,
Hmm.
which he still has a program down there. So
Hmm.
he's a remarkable guy, and I was really happy to hitch my wagon with his for many years because
Yeah.
he was. I thought the work we were doing was important too.
Well,
I
another,
I,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I just thought it would. Yeah, I was just going to say I thought the work that we were doing felt important and educational. So
Well, another organization you've been involved with over the years is the CMA, the Country Music Hall of Fame. And give us a little bit of background on how you got involved with that and several of their programs.
I ended up getting an offer to go work down there as a stringed instrument curator,
Hmm.
and which is kind of funny because I'm no luthier, or I don't have that kind of skill. And even in terms of musicians who are gearheads, who love the equipment and know every kind of amp or every kind of guitar,
Hmm.
I'm not particularly one of those either, but I do have a big interest in history, and and I love sort of connecting people and things. So
Right.
they still, even giving them fair warning, they still hired me, and for about 3 years down there, I worked and helped create a new database for all the musical instruments and stuff that they had in their archive. But the main thing I think I helped with down there was I lobbied to have this program called Nashville Cats. I didn't name it. The committee above me there did, but through the they were gracious enough to say, yeah, Bill, go run with this. And so the first like 40 programs of those over the years, I was responsible for the content and putting those things together. I
Hmm.
don't do it anymore, but it's ongoing. It's honoring the side musicians, the people or the
Right.
studio musicians who didn't get the spotlight, but
Right.
were part of these, world-changing records.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm being a sideman sometimes as you are. You definitely a Nashville cat. And well, let me ask you, have you ever covered that on one of your albums? The
Oh,
song?
Nashville Cats. You know what? I got to sing it with John Sebastian, the longest one.
Wow, the original.
Out in Los Angeles,
Yeah.
were doing this. There's a band out there called Wild Honey Orchestra,
Hmm.
and they do real theme-oriented things, and they get people from the original bands, and then they'll do a kind of a big showcase around those beloved, bands or
Tunes.
songwriters, whatever.
Yeah.
And it's very similar to what we do here in Nashville with the long players, which is something I've been doing for 20 years now
Yeah.
too.
I was going to ask you about that. How
Yeah.
did you get started with that?
Um, well, it was like I'd seen other bands out there doing a full album, like, okay, we're gonna do our new album now.
Hmm.
Bling bling. And at that point, so much of music was albums were not the focal point anymore. It was like singular songs and
Right.
digital releases, and the fact that that art of creating something that holds together and is a sit down and experience it kind of situation of loving an album,
Hmm.
knowing what the next song is, and I just thought that was going by the wayside. So to celebrate the ones that we all grew up on, started asking friends to say, "Would you do this?" And we got a core group together, and it was the same band that would do a John Lennon tribute every year. Uh,
Hmm.
Gary Talent from the E Street Band, Bruce
Yeah.
Springsteen's band,
Yeah.
uh, and a guy named Steve Allen, who's a guitar player who had been in a band called 2020. Steve Eby's the drummer who played in a band called Human Radio from Memphis,
Hmm.
had a MTV hit, and John Dedrick was the original keyboard player. But three of those of us are still in that situation. Gary's off all around the world, but Brad Jones plays bass, and
Hmm.
we've got a revolving keyboard slot. But we add extra musicians when we have to. But it's a joyous thing. And now we're past 20 years doing that. We just had a 20th anniversary earlier this year.
Well, I've caught you guys several times in concert, and it's amazing at some of the guest singers, guest performers that you guys bring up on stage. It's amazing.
You know what? That's just luck. Who lives here in Nashville, and and I'm lucky. I've had a lot of situations where I interact or either on a professional level, co-write or work
Right.
with a
Right.
lot of different people, or else just sometimes just call up out of the blue and say, "Hey, we're doing this. Would you be interested?" And I remember I never really worked with Sonny Curtis from the Crickets before, but the next thing we know, he's up singing "I Fought the Law and the Law Won" with us, and he wrote it.
Yeah.
He was the one who wrote it. I just love that full circle thing that happens there.
Yeah.
Uh, but anyway, yeah, it's that's the lawn players is a joy, and that keeps going.
Well, let me ask you, we got a few minutes left here. We can't leave without talking about your latest album. It's called Look Into It. Give me and by the way, we're playing a couple of those cuts and
Thank you, thank you.
love Bunny in the High Grass. I love that one. And
That's the bluegrass one. And our old friend in Bowling Green, David Romer, who had the record store that I talked about earlier,
mhm.
that's him playing banjo and mandolin on that.
Nice, nice.
So,
Yeah,
but
I love the album and I love the Not My Parade and several others on there that we've been playing. So I really like that.
thank you, Jay. I
Sure.
really appreciate you spinning that. And
Yeah.
yeah, I just, you know what? I just keep writing and recording. And then once I have enough songs to where, wow, well, how will this fit as an album? And they've become a little more eclectic in my older age. I have to say now there's like a bluegrass song next to a reggae cut, next to,
Yeah.
full on rock and roll. And then there's some country-ish, kind of
Sure.
stuff too on my most recent record. There's a song on there called uh, Road Trip Betty. It's like a,
Hmm.
like a country-ish kind of
Right.
uh, uh, JJ Cale vibe kind of
Right.
thing.
Right. Right.
So yeah, there's just I'm just kind of trying to do a little bit of everything.
Well, you know,
check all the
eclectic
boxes.
eclectic is not bad. You know, that's
Yeah, I don't think it is either. And it's just trying to check all the boxes while I can, you know.
yeah. You know, in the old days, eclectic in radio was called AOR, album oriented rock, and now it's
Yeah,
called
right.
Americana. It's called
Yeah,
Americana, and
yeah.
it's very wide tent, and we're glad you're part of it. And before I let you go, the great new album you got out is called Look Into It, and plug your website one more time.
Yeah, it's BillLloydMusic.net, all four L's in a row. I've got some upcoming gigs. Radney and I are doing a reunion with
Oh, great.
Don Henry and John Vesner at City Winery on August 27.
Okay.
And the Long Players having a show the 24th, and then I play around Nashville uh, with a band called the Pop Tarts occasionally, and that's been a recent thing, and that's been a lot of fun. We play at a place called East Side Bowl
Yeah,
up in Madison. So
it's a popular
yeah,
place.
yeah. So anyway, I'm kind of retired, but I'm not. You know, I'm sort of still playing at it.
Yeah, semi-retired, as they say now, right?
There you go. There you go.
Semi-retired. You go out when you feel like it, and you stay at home when
Yeah,
you feel like it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's just that's kind of it.
So, hey, Bill, great talking to you. I have one more question for you, then I'll let you go. What's on your turntable right now? And I know you
Oh,
listen every day to something.
you know what? It's kind of a habit for me. I wake up in the morning, I'll get some coffee going, and I'll go to my turntable and I'll put something on just to kind of start the day. Well, it was yesterday, and I haven't really put anything on this morning, but I'm actually out of coffee right now. That's probably part
Oh
of the reason.
no, no,
Yeah.
we might stop and go to the store and get you some now.
And anyway, but from yesterday, it was Moby Grape. You
You
remember the
know,
band Moby Grape?
I remember Moby Grape. I was in a little rock and roll grunge garage band in the mid '60s called Blue Grape, and we took half of our name from them. So
There
anyway,
you go.
they were a nice band. Yeah, very
Yeah, they
you know,
had good rock and roll. A lot of five singer-songwriters. Everybody
yeah,
sang and everybody wrote. It was really a powerful band.
it
And
was.
they made a record called 20 Granite Creek that it's kind of a hippie country record in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
Anyway, I was listening to that yesterday.
very
But
nice.
yeah, I have a big record collection, as you know,
Yep.
and I use it when I can. So
Bill Lloyd, thank you very much for joining us today on Americana Country Interview. Great seeing you, my friend.
it's a joy to get to talk to you. And there's my phone. It's a joy to get to talk to you, man.
Thank you so much.
All
We'll
right.
see you next time on Americana Country Interview.